Well, let's go live now to City Hall for an update on Toronto's winter services plan.
On the Better Living Centre, I'd like to thank our partners at Exhibition Place for getting this agreement done and for allowing us to offer more space this winter to people experiencing homelessness. I'd also like to thank our partners at Fred Victor Centre and Dixon Hall for all of their work in getting this respite up and running in a very, very short period of time. Once the Better Living Centre is fully operational, it will provide, as I said, much needed shelter and indoor space for 240 individuals. The program will ramp up starting tomorrow with 40 spaces each day until it reaches full capacity on December the 26th. People who are interested in going to the Better Living Centre should call us at Central Intake to be referred to that program. The program will be operational until late March, and at that time we'll need to pass the building back to X Place and work on supporting people in that program, find additional shelter space or space in permanent long-term housing. So to update the details of our winter services plan shared in October, we've opened 180 shelter spaces. We've activated 3 warming centers that open when temperatures reach -5 degrees Celsius, and a 4th warming center will soon be open. And amongst those 4 programs, there's space for 180 people. We've started to tenant the 275 supportive housing opportunities we talked about in October, and just over 100 people have moved into those spaces, freeing up additional locations in the shelter system. And finally, our Streets to Homes program will continue to provide street outreach services to people who are living outdoors and at encampments. They'll do their best to connect with people and encourage them to come inside, but they'll also provide warm blankets, sleeping bags, and warm winter clothing. When temperatures get extremely cold this winter at -15 degrees Celsius, the city will add additional street outreach teams and additional surge capacity across the shelter system. I'd now like to walk you through a few technical slides just to show you what's happening within the shelter system and some of the pressures we're experiencing. So this slide shows you shelter capacity and occupancy. And as you can see, both have continued to grow. Between September of 2021 and today, we've added 2,865 beds to the system. On December 17th, we sheltered 9,370 people, which marks a 44% increase over that time. I expect in the depths of this winter, we'll be sheltering in the shelter system close to 10,000 people. Next slide. So occupancy trends for refugee claimants. Since September of 2021, we've seen the number of refugee claimants in the shelter system increase from 537 to 4,045 people on December the 17th. In November alone, the shelter system admitted 685 new refugee claimants, while in that same month, we housed 334 people into housing. So new refugee claimants currently in the shelter system are coming in at twice the rate that we can support them to move into permanent housing. Next slide. So this chart gives you another glance at trends over time. You can see that the number of refugee claimants has been growing again since September 2021, when borders reopened and travel restrictions eased. And at the same time, we've seen the number of people sheltered who are not refugee claimants has been falling over that period of time, from a high of 6,400 people to 5,325 in December. Next slide. So this slide shows you our family placement list, and the reality is our shelter system is so busy that we've had to start a waiting list for families that are seeking its support. Currently, for any family with children that calls Central Intake, we assist them in finding accommodation and pay for that accommodation in hotels across the city. The family then waits for space to become available in the shelter system. This list has also continued to grow and now totals 467 families, over 1,400 people, and 322 of these families are refugee families. Next slide. City staff also started working with the Canadian Red Cross to support another 411 refugee claimants in hotel accommodations outside of the shelter system. This was a result of Council's direction for us to open 250 spaces in the summertime. So in summary, when you look at the number of people within the shelter system and you add to that the number of families on the family placement list and those supported by the Canadian Red Cross, Toronto is currently accommodating 11,452 people as of December the 17th. Of these, 5,422, or 47%, are refugee claimants. Next slide. You know, it is true that Toronto provides significantly more service than any other jurisdiction in this country. And even with this rich service landscape, each day, approximately 200 people are left unmatched to a shelter bed in Toronto after they call our central intake phone service. That usually includes between 50 and 100 refugee claimants. Unfortunately, we've seen these numbers grow significantly over the course of the summer and into fall. We've seen a slight decrease as we've opened some winter programming. But we know that it doesn't reflect the total number of people in need of shelter space on any given day in the city. Next slide. So shelter support and housing and our community partners are on track to house about 5,000 people this year in permanent, deeply affordable housing and supportive housing. Due to the increasing cost of rent in Toronto and insufficient social assistance rates, however, households that are in the emergency shelter now need financial help to bridge the affordability gap and leave homelessness. One of the programs that we've relied on is the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit, and it's been very successful in moving people out of the shelter system. And it provides that financial bridge to people's income support so they can afford rent in the private market. It's a benefit that's been particularly helpful in assisting refugee claimants, individuals, and families. Since its launch in 2022, the COB program, as it's known, has become the leading pathway out of homelessness for emergency shelter users, and in recent months accounts for 75% of all housing outcomes created, and creating that much-needed flow of people through the shelter system itself. You can see on this graph that the city ran out of this important benefit in mid-June, and without it, the number of people housed from our shelter system plummeted. Since the increase in funding provided by the City of Toronto and matched by the province in August 2023, the COB benefit has supported over 1,300 households to exit homelessness, and you can see that rebound in recent months. It's forecasted to reach 2,000 households, approximately 300 people per month, by the end of the program in March 2024. You know, these are 1,300 or 2,000 individuals that otherwise would still be in the shelter system, meaning more people would be calling and not getting matched to a shelter bed, and more people would be on the street. Demand for the COB program continues to outstretch the available benefits each month, meaning if we had more of them, we could certainly house more people out of the shelter system. In order to maintain shelter flow and relieve pressure in a stretched shelter system, the city urgently needs other orders of government to step up and ensure that Toronto receives sufficient funding to support at minimum 300 households per month through the COB program. We're calling specifically on the federal government to match the province's additional COB funding allocations to ensure there's sufficient funding to both sustain the existing program and for new recipients, while ensuring the city is able to maintain the program at its existing level in 24 and 25. Without this funding, the city is likely to see shelter outflows drop again as they did this summer in August and September. The final slide, I'd like to touch on some of our financials. So our budget submission to the 2024 budget for next year is $787 million. The estimated total expense for a refugee response in 2023 is $200 million. The projected expense in 2024 is $250 million. We are very thankful to the provincial government for its contribution of $600 million to the shelter system over the next 3 years. However, we note that that funding is conditional on contributions by the federal government. And unless we see those contributions, we're at risk of seeing more people on the streets of our city, and the funding from the province could also be at risk. I'd like to now pass it over to Councillor Bravo for some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Gord. I think there's no denying anywhere in this city or in this country that homelessness and the affordable housing crisis is something that has become a human emergency in every town and city. What you've heard today is the City of Toronto stretching again to meet this demand. The opening of the Better Living Centre is something that's been anxiously awaited in community. And it's something that I think is important to remember that respite, this kind of service was not offered last year. And we heard from frontline organizations and from medical professionals that this was something that was needed. So obviously, you've seen some additions over what was announced by ourselves earlier this fall. And the work to ensure that we're meeting the demand in every way continues. But I think it's important to note that given the city's fiscal position today, what has been announced and what might be needed next year is always in jeopardy unless we are able to secure $200 million annually, $600 million total over 3 years from the provincial government. And I'll come back to that because we know that the federal government needs to step up and match or better. I think it's important to remember that the City of Toronto is meeting needs and providing services outside of its jurisdiction. Refugees are not the City of Toronto's jurisdiction, but the need is being attended to here with care. I think it's also important to remember that, when you hear about that Canada-Ontario housing benefit, it's the provincial government and the City of Toronto that's been funding that. Without that additional influx of money in August, 1,350 households would not have been housed. Think about that. The City of Toronto is funding a program whose title starts with the word Canada. Where is the federal government on that? And it's working. We know that
we've been listening to a live update down at City Hall from city officials updating the city on its response for the Toronto's winter services plan, warming centres, respite centres. Let's go back to City Hall where the city is providing an update on its Toronto's winter services plan and taking some questions from reporters.
Maybe explain the difference between a warming centre and the 24-hour respite site, the difference between the two. And does the Better Living Centre, is it conditioned based on the temperature as would a warming centre be?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, Mark. So our 24-hour respite programs will open and be operational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until the end of the winter season. So when the Better Living Centre opens tomorrow and phases in, it will be open until late March. By contrast, our warming centres are activated when the temperature reaches -5 degrees Celsius or when Environment and Climate Change Canada might forecast a significant weather warning. They would open until that threshold warmed up above 5 degrees. It's our practice to make sure that anyone who is admitted to a program is supported and can stay until they find a way into the shelter system. That can sometimes take several days. But that's the difference between the two service models. One open for the duration of the winter and the other one activated based on the temperature.
Follow up on some questions I was asking yesterday. Obviously, -5 is much different than -15. That's certainly an improvement. There has been some questions, though, the difference between -5 as it's been forecasted versus -5 with a wind chill. So why is it that perhaps with a wind chill, when it drops below -5, do the warming centres not open?
Sure. So when we reported through council and after some consultation with, the community on this, we feel like we've made significant progress in changing the threshold to when these important life-saving services open. So before -15 was the temperature. Now it's -5 degrees. Our staff monitor that on a daily basis. They usually make the call every morning at 7 a.m. based on the Environment Canada forecast, and that is the process by which we open those services.
I'll leave it to my colleagues right after another very...
Once again, we've been listening to an update from city officials about Toronto's winter services plan. We're going to go back live now to City Hall for an update on Toronto's winter services plan. Let's listen in.
Longer-term financial support from the federal government to assist specifically on a component of the shelter system that's playing a significant role in the immigration space. Not sure if you had any comments to that, Councillor. No?
And then just on that, we're hearing a lot of calls for the federal government to step up with this funding from the City of Toronto. Is there an update on any meetings? Do you have anything on the books to secure that funding or to have a conversation with them about what the needs are? Is there anything coming up, or is it just still sort of you're continuing to ask and say, we need this money, but they're not coming up with it?
You know, I'll comment at a staff level, and then maybe I'll pass it over to Councillor Bravo. I would say that in the New Deal discussions that have been underway, the federal government did join those conversations towards the end of those meetings. We're hopeful that those conversations will bear fruit going forward. We're in touch with our staff level connections at the federal government on a daily basis. So we're forever hopeful that we'll see a positive outcome here at the staff level. That's what I can provide. But Councillor Bravo can comment.
Thanks. I think you can count on the fact that people are working 24 hours a day to try to get an agreement in the senior public service and the mayor's office. Those conversations will continue. And we all feel the pressure. The $200 million per year for 3 years for the shelter system from the provincial government, which we absolutely need just to meet what we're offering today, is contingent on the federal government coming through with bills, paying the bills that it owes, and then over 3 years meeting its obligations, which you heard is going to be $250 million next year. So we know that the conversations continue, and we remain hopeful that they will see that they have to meet their obligations to refugees at the federal level.
Hi, Rob Easton, CBC. Wondering about, as far as the numbers of people that are being turned away currently, how many of those are you aware of are resorting to sleeping outside or in encampments?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, it's hard to know, frankly, in terms of where all the individuals are when they call us. We do know that, you know, there's close to 300 active encampments across the city right now that our staff visit on a regular basis and try and connect with people and offer them space when space is available. But certainly there's a number of those folks that call that are sleeping on the street in the city.
And then as far as the actual encampments go, are you aware of the population of those 300 encampments and how many of them have been cleared so far this year?
So I would have to get more information in terms of how many people we've housed from those encampments. I'll tell you our Streets to Homes program, which works with folks on the street, has housed about 325 people so far this year. 87 people right out of Allen Gardens, which is had been one of our largest encampments in the city. It's staff's practice right now not to clear encampments. It's our approach to provide service first, connect with people, understand what their needs are, and do our best to match them either to shelter or to work with them on a long-term permanent housing plan.
Okay, I just follow up. I personally have witnessed a few of them being cleared. So, I mean, where is the line lie with the actual, where people are being offered services versus just moving on to another spot?
So you may be referencing most recently a situation near Kensington Market where, in fact, we did clear some debris left at encampment after we had housed or sheltered some of those individuals. At that location, for example, we only moved half of the debris because some other individuals did not want to leave the location, so the other half was left. But again, the focus of staff at the city and the variety of divisions working on this is to focus on people's needs, offer them support to get into shelter immediately or to work with them on a long-term housing plan.
Thank you.
We're going to go to online. Victoria Gibson from the Toronto Star has a question. Just checking the audio.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Great. So this question's for Gord. I wanted to ask about COHB. With the top up in funds in August, how long are you expecting that funding to last and the city to be able to offer benefits before that runs dry again?
Yeah, hi, Victoria, and thanks for that question. So, with the current funding we have available, we anticipate to be able to house 300 households per month until March of 2024. That will bring us to the end of this year's allocation. And so our comments today really focusing in on if we want to continue that flow of people through the shelter system, we're going to need some significant more investment by all orders of government.
And the city has been calling for the use of the armories as additional shelter space. What's the status of those negotiations?
Again, maybe I can comment at a staff level and maybe ask Councillor Bravo to join. At the staff level, we made that request in November through appropriate channels through the province and on to the federal government. As staff, we let the federal contacts we work with know that immediate help was required, not on a short-term basis, but on a long-term basis. And we haven't heard back anything more at a staff level with respect to those conversations.
We've been listening to a live update down at City Hall on Toronto's winter services plan.